Hi, and welcome to Danny After Dark. If you're new here, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a notification or a new episode. Tonight, we have a very, very special guest joining us. We have Jerri Williams, a retired FBI agent. She spent 26 years with the Bureau, specializing in major economic fraud and corruption investigations. Throughout her career, she received numerous awards, including 4 United States Attorney Awards for Distinguished Service. Jerri is also an author who writes books inspired by real FBI cases. She also is the host and producer of the podcast FBI Retired Case File Review, which is a true crime and history podcast. This is where I first learned of Jerri and subsequently recommended her podcast on one of my previous true crime podcast recommendation videos. It is with great pleasure and honor to have Jerri on Danny After Dark. So without further ado, let me introduce Jerri Williams. Hi, Jerri.
Hi.
How are you?
I am doing great. I'm in North Carolina. That's where I live now. I moved out of the Philly area, and it is storming and raining here, but we need the rain, so I'm okay.
Good. I see your background there, and I see in big letters the word FBI, and I'm so curious what that is behind you.
That is actually my scrapbook. So I did a scrapbook of my career from the very beginning when I was a juvenile probation officer just before I became an FBI agent. And so it just takes you through my career and my different assignments, different offices, different squads, and different cases. And yeah, it's just a fun little scrapbook that I put together that once I'm gone, it will probably end up in the Dawson place.
Oh my gosh. I was all excited for it, but that took a turn.
I'm sorry to take it to that such a morbid turn, but
no, but that's really cool. You put that together. That's awesome. Oh goodness. So me and you actually met in person last year at CrimeCon Orlando.
Yes, we certainly did. I remember it well. That CrimeCon, I describe it as an event that's full of hope and despair. Because it really, at some point, you're smiling and you're happy and you're talking to someone, and then all of a sudden, they share their personal story, and you remember that there are real people behind some of these cases that we discuss. And at any moment, you could be talking to a family member of a victim, and you can feel their deep despair, and you understand how important it is for them to find justice. And so it really helps bring the true crime industry, the entertainment part of it, to reality, that you remember exactly who you're talking about and what they've gone through. So yeah, it's full of hope, because a lot of these families are hoping to get someone to carry their story into the media, into the public, and then despair, just understanding, what's happened to them and what's happened to their loved ones. So it's really a roller coaster of emotions when you're at CrimeCon. Don't you agree?
100. You just summed it up so well. Last year, Orlando was actually my first CrimeCon, and everything you just described is pretty spot on. There was one podcast that I'd never heard of. It was called, I believe it was like, Did You Kill My Father? Or Did You Kill My Dad? And they had a booth, and I went over and talked to them, and I was like, I've never heard of this. And the girl was explaining that her father was murdered several years prior, and it's still unsolved. So she goes to these events to keep the word up there and to keep the presence known that this is an unsolved case and I want answers. It was just, I actually was in tears after speaking with her, and I was like, can I have a hug? And she was the sweetest girl. And yeah, it's just, exactly like you said, you don't know who you're talking to. And some people are there to try to get those answers and get the word out there.
Yeah, and since, my podcast, I only cover fully adjudicated cases that the FBI's worked. And so there were many times I was in a conversation and someone wanted to know if I could feature their particular case. And I had to explain that that's not, what I do. That's not the focus of my podcast. And, you could see the disappointment there.
Oh.
Mm.
So there's a lot to get into because you are a woman of many talents. And one of the things we'll get into later, because I remember at CrimeCon, I did let you know before the weekend ended, I was like, I purchased your book, FBI Myths and Misconceptions. I purchased it that weekend on Amazon. So when I got home, it was right there ready for me. So we'll get into that book a little later. But
okay.
I think just to start, how did you begin your career with the FBI? Was that something you always wanted to do?
Nope. I never even thought about it. When I thought about the FBI, I thought about, like everybody back then, white males in dark suits and sunglasses. It just never crossed my mind that it would be something that I would do one day. I was a psychology major in college, and I was able to get a great job working in Newport News, Virginia, where my father's from and where we settled when he retired from the when he retired from the Air Force. He had been in the Air Force for 21 years, and we settled there. So after college, I went to college at Morgan State University in Baltimore. I came back home and I was able to get a job as a juvenile probation officer. My title was actually aftercare counselor. And what I did was to use my education, my psychology, to work with families who had kids that had been sent away to reform schools and group homes because they had criminal problems in the community, and they were sent away. And so I worked with them using family therapy that I learned in order to help transition those kids back into the community and hopefully get them back at school or get them a job. And so that's what I was doing when I saw this advertisement that said that the FBI was looking for women and minorities. And I was like, what's this all about?
Oh gosh. So then once you saw that ad, what happened after that? Like, what was the application process? And I'm not even sure that's the right word, the application process to enter the FBI.
Yeah, that's it. So the first thing I did is call the number on the flyer. And of course, this was 42 years ago. I am so old.
Oh my gosh. No.
But this was, so there was no internet, that I couldn't look anything up. I guess I could have gone to the library and picked up a book or two, but I called cold, not knowing really anything about the FBI and who they were and what they did. And the recruiter, the special agent, Randy Waldrop, I always remember him, really took his time to explain what they did and ask me questions about me and my background. And he really wanted to recruit me. I was on the phone with him for at least 45 minutes. I still have my notes. It's in the scrapbook.
Oh,
I still have
wow.
the notes I took that day that explain everything to me. And I will admit this. This is going to sound so bad, but I'm going to be honest. The thing that really got me interested, you know how on cartoons where the eyes go out, woo, woo,
Yeah.
woo, got me interested is that if I joined the FBI, I would be doubling my salary. I was making $14,000 a year as a probation officer, aftercare counselor, and at the time, the bureau was an agent, a brand new agent, was making 28,000, and so that really kind of perked me up.
Yeah.
But also, my roommate from college, who is still my best friend today, I talk to her almost every day. When we graduated, she became a police officer in Baltimore. So it wasn't that far fetched for me to be thinking about law enforcement. So I don't want it to sound like I only did it for the money.
Right.
That was something that was interesting that she had already, kind of gone through that door. And I returned the favor because after I became an FBI agent, I talked her into it and she became an FBI agent too. So
Oh, that's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, and that's exactly what happened. He talked me into it. I filled out at the time it was like this huge application, which I think was part of the screening process. If you were to actually fill this thing out, which for me was very difficult because it asked a lot of things about your past. And as an Air Force brat, we traveled all over the world. You know, I lived in Germany and England and then in the states and Massachusetts and Washington State, and so I had a lot of places and things to complete the application, but I did. And the most shocking thing about this origin story is that 6 months later, I was walking into the FBI Academy, thinking to myself, "What have I done?"
Oh man.
Uh,
Were
but
you in the same? Oh wait, no, you said later you recruited your friend. Okay, so she wouldn't have been in the
no, she
same
came in like
training
6 years later. Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. Okay. So once you went through the training and you became an FBI agent, how does that work? Do you get to pick the specialty, or I'm not sure if that's even the right term, that you're interested in doing, or do they just place you where they need someone? How does that work?
I always like to tell people that you are at the beginning, you are a body. Really, at any time during your career, you're a body. And if they have a need, the slogan was, you know, for the needs of the bureau. So if they had a need for a body and they looked around and there you were, then you went there. So you could end up working anything. I just happened to some of the first cases that I worked once I got settled in Sacramento, which was my technically my first office. I was in the Norfolk division for 6 months, but I was working government fraud, which I didn't like that much because the victim is the United States. You know,
Hmm.
somebody defrauded the United States. So, you know, when I'm doing my interviews and everything, I'm just talking to another bureaucrat like me. But when I got to Philadelphia, eventually I was able to get into the economic crime squad, where it's the same type of fraud investigations, but your victim is a real person. You know,
Hmm.
it's a elderly couple, or it's a business owner, or you know, it's somebody that's real and that you can talk to, and you can feel their pain, and you can get motivated and feel, you know, how important it is for you to complete that investigation. And you know, that's always you know, a feel good moment for you to have a purpose, to feel that purpose in whatever you're doing.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's possible for you to describe what a normal day was like when you did this work in the FBI. So if it's easier, can you describe what even a normal week was like when you were working?
Yeah, and for me, everybody there are so many there are over 300 violations that the FBI works. And the way they do it in the FBI is that you have a squad, and on your squad, everybody who works those same general crimes, those same general violations are on the squad together. And
Okay.
so on my squad, it would have been a lot of people working different white collar crime cases, similar to what I was doing. Uh, but there were other people that might have been working on a drug squad, or working on a terrorist squad, or working bank robberies. And so their days might have been a little different. But for the most part, you know, you come into the office, you might work on reports, our narratives, we call them 302s, basically a written narrative of what happened the day before, who you spoke to. And so you might work on writing up those, and maybe making some phone calls, you know, talking with the U.S. attorney that you're working with. And then the main thing that you're going to do is hit the streets, you know, get out there
Mm.
and talk to witnesses, do your surveillances, meet different people, develop informants, make connections. That's what you're doing. And so, you know, you want to spend some time in the office, but the majority of your time is out there trying to gather information. I mean, that's basically what we did, no matter what squad you're on, is to gather information, gather evidence, develop informants in order to be able to take that case that you started with just an allegation and have it end up where there's maybe a trial or a plea, but somebody goes to prison, That's the goal. Somebody
Wow.
pays. Somebody pays.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. I didn't realize there was that many kind of steps to it. And you describing the kind of hitting the street and like, boots on the ground type of work. And that just
Mhm.
like right away, my eyes are like, oh my gosh, that sounds so fascinating.
It really is. It's a lot of fun, when we don't necessarily have partners. There's no partner assigned to you, but you develop friendships and maybe you're going someplace and you have a particular interview and you think, no, I want, her to go with me, or let me see if he can come with me. And so you find people that you enjoy working with, and they go out on your cases and you go out on their cases. So it's really of we use this word a lot, and that's family, but it
Mm,
really feels like a family. Sometimes a dysfunctional family, but it really does feel like a family, and we're working all together to help each other on our cases.
yeah. Are you able to tell us if there were any well-known cases that you assisted with, or any cases that the viewers might find really fascinating to hear about?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I had some major fraud cases that I worked on, including ones that I was in charge of, that I was the head agent, the case agent, and one of them, the most that the one case that got a lot of publicity that ended up on American Greed, the CNBC show American Greed. So
Yeah.
if you're late one night when you're watching that show, you might you might come across me talking about the case. But it was at the time the biggest charity Ponzi scheme in the country, and it was a $350 million Ponzi scheme where the founder, who started off trying to do good and raise money and show nonprofits and wealthy philanthropists, how to fund different projects. He started off that way, and then something happened, and instead of just admitting that his business was not doing well, which is a lot of times how these Ponzi schemes start. They're legitimate businesses that go bad, and the founders or the company owners are so desperate to keep it going that they start doing a Ponzi scheme where
Mm,
they pay the older investors by with money that they get from new investors. And so that's exactly what he started. And it got to a point where people wanted to participate. He was telling them that if you gave him $500,000, he had an anonymous donor who will match it and give your charity $1 million. And we know right now you have all these people asking for political donations, and a lot of them you'll see that there's matching funds. The problem with his matching fund was that he needed to hold your money for 6 months to a year before the anonymous donor was going to match it. And he said that was because he needed to make sure that these were extra funds. They're not you weren't taking funds out of your business that you needed to operate. They were not operational funds. These were funds that you had already participated in getting funding, getting donations, and that you could now give to him to hold for you. It doesn't make any sense, I know, but people believed it at the time. That he would hold on to it, and then you would get your money doubled. And it worked. I mean,
yeah.
people were getting their money doubled. But as we all know, that there is not enough money in the world that will sustain a Ponzi scheme forever. You have to constantly, constantly get new investors in order to pay off those original investors and the people that were there before the latest people. And it gets
Yeah.
to a point where it's going to collapse and it's going to fall. And that's exactly what happened to him at the tune of $350 million. Now, by the time the judge does this thing called clawback, where people at the beginning who benefited from this crime, from this fraud, have to give back. You claw that money back, and they have to give the money back to the people at the end. Everybody usually comes out somewhat better. You'll never get the money that you thought that you were making through the investment, but a lot of times you get the money that you put in back. For instance, Bernie Madoff. Most of the people who were victims of Bernie Madoff got at least most of their initial investment back. You know, they thought they put in 50,000 and now they have $1 million. Well, no, you're not going to get $1 million back, but you're going to get the 50. And so at the end, the loss where the money was gone and nobody knew what happened to it ended up being about $135 billion was the actual loss. But initially, we just knew that $350 million, was taken in by the New Era Philanthropy. That's what it was called, the Foundation for New Era Philanthropy. And the subject of that case was John Bennett. And actually, you mentioned at the beginning how I take true stories and I write crime fiction about it. My book, Greedy Givers, is a fictionalized version of that case. Names are different. I've added so many things from my imagination. So the story is not the story, but it is inspired by my case working on the Foundation for New Era Philanthropy Ponzi scheme.
Wow. One of the questions I was going to ask was, how do the victims, how do they come out at the end? But you answered that, and it's good to hear that at least they get their initial.
Yeah, that's not always. The majority of times, I have to be honest, the majority of times in a fraud scheme, you do not get your money back. Okay. The money is gone. Many of the con men, many of the fraudsters use that money and they convert it for their own personal use. And so it is gone. Now you can sell their $1 million homes and their yachts and their fancy luxury cars and get some of it back. But the money that was spent on vacations and fine dining and, furs and jewelry and all of that stuff, a lot of that you're never going to see again, especially if it's like a telemarketing fraud or one of these frauds that we see where the perpetrators are overseas. You may never, most likely, ever see that money again.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I was all happy, and then that just took it down.
Sorry.
No, that's good. That's good to know. Oh man.
One of the worst frauds that I know about, and this one is up front and personal for me now because we're selling my father's home. He died about 2 years ago, and so now we're in the process of selling his house, the family home. And this fraud, when I first heard about this many, many years ago, I thought, well, that is just terrible. And you know how when you are going through your closing at the mortgage, sometimes you bring in a certified check, but sometimes the money is wired. And, you got to be really careful about who you're telling, about the fact that you are, buying a house, are supposed to be receiving, usually it's you're buying a house and that you need to send in money because there's a way for them to get a hold of your contact information, and the wiring instructions come from a con man. And so you end up wiring the money that you have to purchase this home, and you wire it to some con man. And at the end, the mortgage person or the buyer still wants their money. And so the house purchase falls through and you're out of, the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 that you were using in order to do your down payment and closing cost. That to me is the saddest thing, because that money has been wired and it is gone. And now not only have you lost the money, but your hope of this home that you wanted to purchase is also destroyed.
Yeah. Oh
I mean,
gosh.
don't you wonder what these con men must say to themselves, con women, con artists say to themselves to make it okay to do that to somebody?
Or they just don't feel anything towards
Yeah,
the, you know,
yeah,
they just
yeah.
completely lack any type
Mhm.
of, you know, human emotion that would make them feel this is wrong. They just, I don't know.
Yeah,
That's
it is.
horrible.
It's amazing, and of course, I dealt with those people, people like that all the time. They always want to think that they're the smartest person in the room, and so a lot of times when I walk in the room, they're like, "Oh, she's the FBI agent in charge of this place." Yeah, they try to charm me. I had one guy kept telling me I look like Gladys Knight. Of course, don't look anything like Gladys Knight. But, he was just trying to charm me and flatter me. And, he still ended up, that particular guy ended up going to prison for 14 years for advance fee scheme case. But, I appreciate the compliment.
God. Oh man. So you were recently on another podcast that I'm a huge fan of, the Stop the Killing podcast,
Yes, with
with
my
Catherine
friend.
Schweit and
Hmm.
Sarah
And Sarah
Ferris.
Ferris. Hmm.
Yeah, so I got to meet Sarah last year at CrimeCon and then this year at CrimeCon. Catherine wasn't able to go, unfortunately, but that was a really great episode that you were on. It was actually the two-part episode that you were on. One of the things that you talked about on that podcast with them was in regards to how you weren't just involved in your cases, but it also wasn't uncommon for agents to be asked to assist with other cases in
Yeah.
regards to any arrests that need to be made. And one of the things you mentioned in that was you always had to have your weapon on your person. So can you just, I found that very fascinating. I know you guys kind of spoke about it more from the weapons angle, but you and Catherine gave some really great, conversation and narrative about how you always had to be prepared with your weapon as an agent. Can you just speak a little bit about that for maybe those who
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
you're just in there doing paperwork some of the days and maybe you don't need your weapon, and that's not the case?
No, not the case at all. You are supposed to have it when you are on duty. You are supposed to be armed. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. If you are on duty, then you should have your weapon with you at all times. And, don't mess up and, leave it at home or leave it in your desk or leave it in your locker, at the gym. You need to have it with you all the time. And we talked about also on that episode, which I reposted on my show. I think it's episode 324, 323. I reposted it on my show as one episode. My episodes are a little bit longer. But the other thing that we talked about was, and I just lost my train of thought.
When you talked about having your weapons on you,
Right.
and
Oh
no, that's
boy.
all right.
Yeah, I
It'll
can't
come.
remember what I was with the point, the wonderful, fantastic, fascinating point that I was gonna make. I can't remember it right
I
now.
think I actually know what point it is, and if I'm wrong, let me know.
Okay.
One of the things that you and Catherine talked about was if you were not on duty, whether you carried your
Yes,
weapon with you.
that is exactly where I was going. There were some agents, many agents, who carried it even if they weren't on duty, whether they were going to their kid's soccer game or to the movies or something like that. And I was not one of those agents. I did not do that. Maybe before I had children, I did, but after I had children, I was just the opposite. I really wanted to put my gun away and lock it up because so many people, the reality is, we didn't talk about this on the show, that for a lot of law enforcement agents, uh, uh, their children or friends of their children, you know, uh, can get into their guns, and there's a lot of accidental shootings and deaths because they're so used to having their gun with them that it may not be as safely maintained at home as you would hope. And this is not just really, I should step back and say it's not just law enforcement, it's anybody who has a weapon. You know,
Mm.
when you have children around, you have to be extra careful because that's fascinating. I mean, and you look at TV shows and you look at movies and even cartoons, you just see everybody with guns and they have their guns out. And so it's fascinating with children. And I knew that it would be fascinating for my son. And I just decided that I would, as soon as I got home, put that away and not have it out. When he was older, maybe 15 or 16, I've taken him to firearms and let him hold the weapon, let him shoot the weapon. We went once with one of his friends just so that he had that fascination, hopefully, dampen a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was not that agent to wore it all the time. And, I was lucky that I didn't. I'm sure I would have felt uh, th- all kinds of emotions if I had been in a situation where I could have saved a life because I had it with me. But it was just a decision that I had to make at the time. And I chose not to carry it with me when I was at my daughter's soccer games and basketball games and my son's, cross country. I did not have it with me.
Yeah. That was a very interesting. Well, I'm glad you expanded on that further here just to get a bit more information on that. Because in that episode, like Catherine, she discussed that she was actually the opposite and she always had it with her. So to kind of hear both sides of it, I think is
But
really great.
yeah, but then she also said, which kind of makes my point, that she said to her girls, if you see me bring this gun out, leave, run away.
Yeah.
So you, you see the dichotomy there.
Yeah.
It's a bad situation. And now instead of taking care of my family and making sure my kids, I'm telling my kids to run because now I'm going to be engaged with the bad guys. And it's just a decision that you have to make as
Yeah.
far as that balance. And there's also I was very honest, and we also talked about the fact that people at the basketball game or soccer game or cross country match would not necessarily know I was law enforcement. There's just a crazy black woman with a gun. And also I thought that that might put me in a situation where I made my kids unsafe. I think a lot of times for a male, especially a white male, people might assume, okay, this guy looks like he's a cop and therefore he has the right to have that gun. He's here to make us safe. And there's so many things that you have to
Yeah.
make a decision. But as far as having that gun on me every day when I went to work, oh, I had no problem with that. It became a part of an appendage. It's a part of my body, and I, used it and valued the fact that I had that right to carry a gun and be in a position to either protect myself or someone else while I was on duty.
Yeah. I just want to say to, the viewers that will be watching this, I'm going to link that particular episode in the description bar because it's a really great episode that the Stop the Killing podcast is really great and informative, but to hear you and Catherine kind of share your experiences and some things you were on the same page, and then a topic like this, you weren't necessarily for very diverse and legitimate reasons. And I think everybody should listen to it because you get a lot out of it. So I will definitely link that in the bar
Thank
below.
you. I thought it was a very impactful
It
episode,
was.
and that's why I decided to repost it on my podcast because we also gave people the opportunity to hear directly from FBI agents who had been in gun battles, who had to pull out their gun and either were shot or who had shot someone. And I took little snippets from episodes that I had done, and I provided those to Catherine
Yeah.
and Sarah to use on their show. So yeah, it was very, very impactful. It was definitely an interesting episode, especially when people, are hearing two women, law enforcement officers, talk about things that sometimes I'm sure, they think that there's a difference, and there really isn't a difference. When you become a law enforcement officer, an FBI agent, whether you're male or female, we're all going through and have the same requirements and responsibilities, and accept those in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. It was very, I agree. It was very powerful, very impactful. Again, it was 2 parts over on the Stop the Killing podcast, 1 episode for FBI retired case file review. And I will link that in the,
Thank
in
you.
the show
I
notes.
think it's good for everyone to talk to. One of the other things that we did, not to take this whole show to talk about that,
No,
but
please.
one of the other things is to recognize that people have the right to carry guns, but to have them look at the deadly force policy and the fact that if they decide to carry their gun and use their gun, that they're going to be held to those same standards.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's something that Catherine talks about quite a bit on Stop the Killing, but you guys really got into it on your episode, and it's something that I don't think people might put a lot of thought into, and it really deserves quite a bit of thought.
Yes, it
But
does. It
yeah.
really does.
So you mentioned when you were on their episode that you had pulled some pieces from your podcast. So let's transition to your podcast. So FBI Retired Case File Review.
Yes.
I have to say, from a listener perspective, it is really one of the most diverse podcasts that I've come across. I really enjoy that you have not only just a diversity of topics, but also a diversity of guests that you have on. So there's absolutely something for everybody, depending on what type of area of true crime, if you will, that people are into. There's absolutely something for everybody. But for those of you who are watching who might not know Jerri's podcast, how did you start getting into podcasting? And can you tell us a bit about it and what listeners can expect to hear?
Yes. All right. So I started the podcast because I started writing books. So the crime novels came first. And my first literary agent was saying to me that if you're going to write books, then you need to develop a platform of potential readers. And I thought, well, at the time, this was in 2016, and I thought, well, I don't want to do blogs. Blogging was still very, very big back then, because if I'm going to write, I'm going to write books. And I thought, well, I'm listening to podcasts, and I know all of these FBI agents. Well, I'm going to do a podcast where I interview FBI agents. And I thought I would do something a little different. Instead of interviewing them about their careers and, kind of walking down memory lane, I just wanted to focus on the case. And so I called it FBI Retired Case File Review, because I interview retired FBI agents, and we just review a case. There may be cases that you've heard about or cases that you've never heard about, but we take the case from the very beginning, when that case was assigned to the agent, to the very end, when she actually, goes to trial or gets a plea, and somebody goes to prison. And so that's what we did. That's what I did. And I started that in January of 2016, 8.5 years ago. And basically it just took off. I was very, very excited, very, very pleased. At the time, of course, it's Apple Podcasts now, but at the time, iTunes, like 3 episodes in, promoted it in their new and noteworthy. This was 8.5 years ago, when that really meant something. It doesn't mean anything as much anymore, because there's so many podcasts. I've been on new and noteworthy since then, and my downloads didn't move an inch. But at that time, it went from a few hundred people listening to like 25,000 people listening. And then after that, I still was able to maintain, 5,000 after the excitement wore off, and I came off of new and noteworthy, and then I continued to grow and get listeners since then. So I've been, very, very fortunate that the FBI is a topic that people, want to hear about, that they're curious about. I like to say that I am on a mission to show the public who the FBI is and what the FBI does through my books, my blog, and my podcast case reviews with former colleagues.
And you absolutely do every single one of those. So
It's really exciting.
You mentioned earlier that you're at number. So how many episodes do you have? Because you're over 300 right now.
Yeah. So on Wednesday, I will be posting episode 326. 326, yeah.
That's incredible.
And that's not even, I have had a few bonus episodes in there too. So I'm sure it's it's like 339 or something like that in absolute episodes. But yeah, 326, legitimate, case file review episodes. I mean, it should be more, but I stopped doing it every week because it got to be really so much work. I mean, I put a lot into it. If you look at my website on my show notes are packed with information and resources and newspaper articles and photos if I can find them about the case. So I started doing it every other week. For the last almost year, I've been doing at least 3 a month because I just have such a strong interest in people wanting to be on the show, and it starts to back up. Like right now, I know I have all my episodes recorded until mid-October, and then I have a list here of the people that are going to be. I'm going to start recording in September until the rest of the year, until next year. So
wow.
Yeah, so
that's
a good problem to have, but
yeah. So you might not be able to answer this because I know I'm putting you on the spot. Out of all of the cases that you've covered on your podcast with all of the other retired FBI agents, was there any that stood out to you and why?
Yes, that's not a hard question. This is not necessarily my favorite one, even though it's a really good one, but it's the one where I understood that what I was doing was this is not to minimize or to downgrade anybody else's show, but I was doing more than just doing a true crime show. And because I looked at it then as institutional knowledge, that what I was providing for other law enforcement agencies, other FBI agents who listen to my show, along with the true crime fans, is that they were telling stories about their investigation that could help another investigator maybe solve one of their cases. And that was the Polly class abduction episode.
Yeah.
I actually put that back out again last year because it was the 20th anniversary of her abduction. And so I re-edited it because it was one of my earlier ones where my audio was not perfect. So I re-edited it and put that back out there again. But the reason it was so impactful for me is that when the case agent, who of course is retired and burly guy that saw a lot of, really violent and terrible things, but as he's talking about feeling the pressure of trying to get to Polly before, she's killed. They have no idea where she is, who's abducted, but that pressure at some point, he had a nervous breakdown. He had a panic attack, and that's his honesty and openness and sharing that and actually tearing up and being emotional let me see that this was, was not just, an FBI agent telling a story, but he was sharing, his life, sharing his sacrifices that he made. And I really understood at the time that this is more than entertainment and a show. This is history, and that it was important that I record the stories, and that's it became a mission. It actually is a mission for me. Sometimes it's a mission that I'm saying to myself, why are you doing this? But You're supposed to be retired. You should be
There's no
sitting
such
back.
thing as
Yeah,
retirement.
sit back. Not for FBI agents. I don't think we know how to do it well. But yeah, I definitely enjoy it. I have met so many wonderful retired agents and retired police partners for the FBI around the country, and it's really special for me to know. Actually, just before we came on, I got a call from an agent, who had recently retired, who wanted to talk about one of the cases that he thought might be working would be good for the show. And that's always exciting, and there's no better, there's no better validation for what I do than to receive a phone call or an email from a retired agent who would like to be on the show, or just is letting me know how much he enjoys listening to it. When you get validation from your peers, that is like, the ultimate pat on the back.
That is amazing. And to give credit where credit is due, and I don't think I told you this, one of your going way back episodes, you interviewed Jim McGee. And I was blown away by his episode. And then he was at CrimeCon Orlando, and I went to his presentation, and I was just, the way he delivered his presentation, I was just like, oh my God, I want more information. I need more information. And I know he had put out a book,
right,
and you guys had talked about it.
I've got it back there. Yeah.
So I went to your show notes, because like you said, your show notes are full of information. And yeah, I emailed him, connected with him, and I said, I heard about you on Jerri Williams' podcast, and I saw you at CrimeCon, and I can't find your book on Amazon, and I really want to order the book. So I connected with him, and he was able to send one to me. And I never would have heard about him if it wasn't for your podcast. And that book, I actually did a book review on his book. It was so good.
Yeah. And for those who are listening who don't know Jim McGee, he was actually in the hostage rescue team when they did there was a prison, what's it called? A prison.
The Talladega.
The Talladega prison riot. And the HRT went in to bring, calm and to stop the riot. And yeah, it was really, a fascinating episode when he talks about blowing off the prison door. Most of the time, people are trying to get out and they're trying to blow their way inside. That's pretty interesting, pretty fascinating story that he tells there. Yeah.
Yeah, but I did, when I emailed him, I gave credit where credit is due. And I said, I heard about you on Jerri Williams' podcast.
Yay. Yeah, that's the great thing, that all my episodes are evergreen. And so, you can go back from the very beginning, and there are some really good ones at the beginning too. That you can listen to. So every day there's people going in and listening to podcast episodes on, all the podcast apps, and, then making their way to website to maybe look at pictures or to, read more newspaper articles. So yeah, I am a rabbit hole diver. So I'm like the type of person that if I see something on 60 Minutes or I'm watching something on the news while they're talking about it, I'm like, oh, and I'm pulling out my phone and, hitting Google to find out more. That's who I am. I guess that's the investigator, the innate investigator in me. And so since I'm pulling all of these articles and photos and stuff anyway, just to be able to ask intelligent questions on the show, then I just put them in the show notes. And so they're there for everyone, which is funny to say because on my show, I don't ask a lot of questions. I let the agents tell their story, and I try not to interrupt too much, but do so when it's necessary for me to make a clarification or to add something that I think needs to be added. But otherwise, I let them present their case review.
Yeah. No, you absolutely do. And you do, when you do ask questions from a listener perspective who knows nothing about being an FBI agent, you ask really good clarifying questions where you're like, for people who don't know what this is. And so, as someone who doesn't know maybe some of the terminology or these, special things that are going on in the case, you give a moment for the guest to explain that. So then I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yes,
Now let's
yes.
continue.
Yes. Yeah, I really try to do that because I know we can drop FBI agents can drop an acronym in a minute. Boom, what is that? And so I try to circle back and have them explain what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love my
So
show. I love what I do. I really, really, I can't see myself not doing it. I can see myself not doing it as often.
it comes across. It truly comes across in your
Good,
podcast.
good.
Absolutely.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
So I'm from New England. I'm from Boston. And one of it was actually multiple episodes that you had covered was the Boston Marathon
Yeah.
bombing. And you had two different agents come on and discuss totally different aspects of working with that case. So I just wanted I don't have a question on that necessarily, but I just wanted to let you know again from a listener perspective that that case really touches home for me in so many ways because I'm here and lived it. And, everybody knows somebody that was impacted from that day, from that bombing. And you did an excellent job covering that case and the agents that you had on. It was really interesting. Again, being from Boston, living the nightmare, and then hearing the FBI agents come in and say their roles and give very different perspectives on what they did. It was so well done. I can't give you enough credit for how you handled that episode and having those agents on. So I just wanted to say thank you for that from a Boston.
Oh, thank you. I've actually done 3. So I did. I interviewed.
Oh man!
I interviewed the special agent in charge, who was in charge of the entire Boston office, who did like a full overview of the Boston Marathon bombing. Then I interviewed a polygrapher who did the polygraph examination on the younger brother's friend, who ended up lying and was charged with lying. And then I did an interview with the hostage negotiator, the agent who actually talked the younger brother out of the boat when he was, hiding after the bombing and after his older brother had been killed, who he actually ran over with by a car. So yeah, so I've done 3, and you're right, being able to cover that case by 3 different agents and not really cover the same thing. I probably could talk to somebody else and get another angle and focus from from somebody else's viewpoint on that case, and so that was really fascinating for me too.
Yeah, as you just recapped it, I realized I didn't hear the first one, so I'm going to have to download that after this and catch up on that. My apologies. I thought there was only 2. Oh gosh, but absolutely it was, oh gosh, yeah, so well done. Anybody from, the New England audience that watches this, you have to listen to those episodes. It's, oh gosh.
Yeah, and I think that again is what I was talking about when I was saying how I realized that my episodes are a different, not better, and please don't think I'm saying that at all, but just a different look at these cases, because there'll be a case that you've heard about. You've heard about it on 20 other podcasts. But when you hear it from the agent and the investigative part, we're looking at it in a totally different way. You're hearing things that you never heard about. Like the case that's going up on Wednesday is the LaToya Figueroa murder case. It's a very famous case out of Philadelphia. Everybody has done that investigation. But I'm going to be covering it from a different angle that you've never heard about it before. Actually, you know what? I said that's the case on Wednesday. No, that's the interview I did today. That that's not going to actually be posted until like mid-September. So
Well, that's something for people to look forward to and
that's
subscribe
right.
to your podcast and get caught up on the other episodes in the
Yes,
meantime.
there's lots and lots of stuff. And I know this is on YouTube. I do have a YouTube channel. It is not as robust and there's not as many subscribers and listeners, as compared to the podcast, but it's just audio only. So if anybody wants to just switch right over and check out the show on YouTube, again, there are no photos, no videos. It's just the audio. But if YouTube is your way of getting your true crime, then you can still do so, or you can listen on any of the regular podcast app type platforms.
Yes, and I will make sure to link that so people can easily find that as well. So let's jump from the podcast to your books. So particularly the one I love, FBI Myths and Misconceptions. I was obsessed with that book when I read it. I highly recommend it. And we could probably do a whole separate show just on the misconceptions alone about being an FBI agent. However, in the interest of time, are there a couple of kind of what I would say the biggest misconceptions that you see from your perspective that you talk about?
Absolutely. I have 20 of them. I probably could come up with 30, but the book has 20 misconceptions. And the number 2 one is the one that I see all the time and the one that really gets me angry. But it is that the FBI doesn't play well with others. I mean, you see that in movies where the FBI agent comes in and they take charge and they treat, the local law enforcement people, really badly, really poorly. And that's just so far from the truth. I mean, everything is worked in with our law enforcement partners, especially when it comes to violent crime, in a task force concept. Where you have maybe your violent crime squad in the FBI, half the people on the squad are local and state law enforcement partners. I mean, we work together. It's very difficult for an FBI agent to roll up on a crime scene and not already know the people that are there, because they've been training together, going out for coffee together, working on cases together. We know them. They're our partners. It really pays for everyone to work together, because, and this is a phrase that you hear often in law enforcement, but a force multiplier. If you can share resources and manpower, then, you can do even better things together. And so, that one, the fact that people think that the FBI doesn't play well with others, and that I read books and still see movies and TV shows where they do that, is it's just so irritating, because, again, especially with terrorism and drug cases and violent crime cases, where, those type of violations where you need the knowledge from all levels, we work very, very well with our law enforcement partners. And that is what I would call a big fat lie.
That's a great one. Is there maybe another big misconception?
The other big misconception, this is number 1 in the book, is that FBI profilers are hunting down serial killers, going through the dark alleys and the moldy basements. And really, that is just not the case. Now, that one is lost. There is no way that we're pulling back that cliche, because the serial killer is actually a genre, for horror movies and for books. People believe that profilers are hunting serial killers, but profilers are really analysts. They're consultants. They're FBI agents who have worked very, very hard in the field, working these type of cases, working violent crime, working child predator cases. And then they go, when they've gotten all of this knowledge, they go back to Quantico, and their job is, as a consultant, to look at cases from around the country, around the world, that are unsolvable. and help go through using their knowledge, their education, their expertise, their experiences to look at these cold cases and try to help the investigators, whether they're other agents or from other law enforcement agencies, find things that might help them figure out who did this case, or why they did this case, or where they did this case, or who the victims are. And that's what they do. But it's a lot more exciting to have the profilers, like in Criminal Minds, hopping on, jets and flying all over the country to solve cases. But that's really not how it works.
Oh gosh. Well, that leads in perfectly to my next question. Are there any true crime shows like Mindhunters, Criminal Minds that you feel are accurate at all, or are they just all off the mark?
Oh, I loved Mindhunter. I thought Mindhunter was so real because exactly what I just said, how they didn't have it where they were actually the ones doing the investigations. They showed them gathering the research, talking to the serial killers to get an understanding of their profile and what made them work that will help them when they look at other cases, kind of look for clues and patterns that are happening. And then in season 2, when they did go to Atlanta to look at the Atlanta child murder case, they were working hand in hand with the case agent, assisting him and providing information. That's what they do. So yeah, Mindhunter, I love that show. I was so angry when they didn't come back with season 3.
Oh,
And they keep promising us that they're going to. There's a possibility there's a third season, but I don't know. I think the actors are all committed to something else now, and I don't know if we'll ever see that again. But yeah, that was pretty good. And let me say this, because now I also have a side gig as a consultant, for TV. I did the Class of '09. If you saw that, it was an FX Hulu show, and I worked very, very closely with the executive producer on that show, and I'm very, very proud of how that turned out. And right now, I'm working on the next J.J. Abrams and LaToya Morgan TV show. It's called Duster. It's going to be on Max. I don't know when it's coming out. It's all filmed and everything. But the point I wanted to make was that I understand that crime fiction, whether it's a book or a TV show or a movie, is entertainment. And so although I point out that this is not really how it happens, I do understand, even as a novelist myself, that the most important thing is the entertainment and to get the story out. And anyone who wants to rely on a TV show, book, or movie to get their education about the FBI, shame on you, because, it's a book, it's a TV show, it's a movie.
Right.
So I understand, and I don't get too upset anymore that if things are just too ridiculous. That may mean I'm not going to read your book. I'm not going to watch the TV show. I'm not going to look at the movie because I can't. I will, as you know from my book, have to take off my shoe and throw it at the TV, or take the book and fling it across the room. But because it's just, it's not accurate. It's not really about accuracy. It's just too far-fetched for me. So I can't enjoy it because it takes me out of the story when I see things. But as far as people wanting to write about the FBI and have us be heroes and just show the awesomeness of what we do, go for it. It's the best recruitment and public relations that we could ever have. So I enjoy the fact that people are interested in stories, whether they're true stories or crime stories, crime fiction stories about the FBI. I just love it all.
So that actually leads really, really greatly into my next question. You're just very flowing right along. Okay, so Jerri did not know the questions that I have. So
I have no idea.
We are just right in sync.
Okay.
So true crime has really captured public interest in the last few decades. From your perspective, what positives has this interest in true crime had? On the flip side, what negatives has this big interest in true crime had as well.
Well, of course, the positive is the work that we've been able to, and the public eyes that we've been able to bring to injustice and to victims that can help them get the justice they deserve. I mean, that is absolutely fantastic. You know, the fact that we're training the public to, you know, keep their ears and eyes open and to learn about what's happening and to, you know, speak up and to provide information and cooperate with the law enforcement. I mean, that is truly the most positive thing. You know, not to blame victims and to support victims. I mean, that is the best thing that's ever come out of it. But I think the negative part is sometimes where, you know, you're telling these stories and kind of forgetting that these are victims, and you know, you're telling the story in a way that is maybe glorifying the bad guy, you know, the killer. um and I and again, I understand, you know, that people have different interests and enjoy different things, but sometimes when the podcast is about kind of telling the story of the killer, it I don't know, I don't necessarily enjoy those as much because, you know, we're making those people, um you know, what's the word?
Maybe the focus.
Yeah, the focus. They're becoming, you know, uh, you know, they're getting that notoriety. They're becoming, um, you know, the entertaining part of the story, and that makes me uncomfortable. You know, that makes me uncomfortable. I mean, the ones where we're focused on telling the victim, but the ones that are about, you know, like a whole podcast or show just on Ted Bundy. You know, what's, you know, I I I don't know. That makes me uncomfortable. Is it wrong? Am I saying that that the people that are doing that are doing something wrong? No, I'm just saying that those aren't for me, and I, you know, just caution them to, you know, equally, at least equally, you know, understand the victims, and not to make these, you know, these celebrities. Don't make the bad guys, the killers, a celebrity, you know, monster celebrities. And I think, you know, in many ways that's already happened. I mean, we know who these people are. We know their names, you know, we know their lives, and they are celebrities. And
Yeah. It was interesting when Netflix came out with their um the movie, I'm blank, it's like Wickedly Evil and Vile. I forget the exact name, but it was when Zac Efron played Ted Bundy.
did not watch it, but go ahead.
So I mean, I did watch it. I'm not a big Netflix true crime person. I think they kind of add in a lot of extra stuff that it's already horrific enough. But I just, again, from someone who's always been into true crime, and I just saw this like resurgence of Ted Bundy and almost like this, dare I say, glorification, if you will. And I'm thinking, we now know what, like, it's very clear what he did back at his trial. I mean, that's a whole thing in itself, but we know what we did. How is this happening again? It was the weirdest thing to kind of see, but it goes right on with what you're saying. And
So that you know, that to me is you know, not, I won't say negative, but that is a downside of the true crime, is that sometimes the killers and the murderers and the predators are given a celebrity, you know, status and glorified in a way that, yeah, I don't know. I saw this. I saw this once when, you know, everybody knows about, or might know about, my little Jerry bobblehead. And when this was several years ago when I was getting this bobblehead made, there I saw a collection of serial killer bobbleheads. You could collect them. And that's when I thought to myself, this has gotten out of hand, you know.
Yeah, a little bit. Ugh.
Yeah, you people are buying and collecting, like superheroes. I've got Spider-Man and Black Panther and Superman. I got all my, superhero action figures, and then right next to them, you've got your serial killer action figure dolls. It just, that makes me
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
That's
Makes
one
me
way to
really,
spice up your desk at the office, I guess.
I
uh,
guess so.
oh gosh. So I just want to, you had mentioned a little earlier your book, Greedy Givers, but I also want to give a shout out to your other books, Pay to Play and FBI Word Search Puzzles. And your books are a great mix for people who are both interested in fiction and nonfiction. So definitely everybody should be checking those out.
Yes.
So just kind of winding everything down, because I know I've been taking up quite a bit of your evening, and
Oh, this is fun. It's been
but I could
going
talk to you for
for
like 5 more hours, honestly. One of the quotes in your book, and it's so powerful. I absolutely love this quote, but for people who maybe haven't read your books or don't know what it means, you say, with a gun, they can steal hundreds, but with a lie, they can steal millions.
Yes.
For someone who doesn't know what that is, can you just explain that?
Yeah, that is when I'm trying to emphasize the importance of fraud, because sometimes when I'm with a true crime crowd and we're all there, everybody's talking about murder and missing women. And, I'm like, I'm talking about fraud. It doesn't seem as important or devastating or dangerous or violent. And I like to make sure people understand, if somebody walks up to you and puts a gun to your head and say, give me all your money, in my case, they might get a couple of dollars. But if they lie to you and convince you and defraud you and are deceptive, they could steal your life savings. And so that's what that means. With a gun, they can steal millions. I mean, I'm saying it wrong. With a gun, they can steal hundreds, but with a lie, they can steal millions. And just trying to really emphasize that fraud and economic crime can be as devastating for someone as a physical assault.
Yeah. So you had mentioned kind of as the interview progressed, some upcoming episodes that you have or some projects, but are there any other ones that people should be keeping an eye out for?
Well, the one about Latoya Figueroa is really, really interesting. Again, I just interviewed the case agent today, but what's so interesting is that he was the pioneer for historic cellular analysis. So everybody knows about cell phone tracing and tracking. This was the FBI agent that began that program. And for 5 or 6 years, he was the one going around the country teaching other people, other law enforcement agents, how to do that until the CAST, the cellular analysis survey team unit, was actually formed. And so I have him on talking about how that case, the Latoya Figueroa murder case, she was a pregnant woman who was killed by her boyfriend, how he was one of the first to use those tools in that case, and how he was one of the first law enforcement officers to testify in a trial about using that sensitive technology. So again, that's coming up like September the 25th, I think it is. And that should be a really, really fascinating episode. But like I said, I do everything. Like the last episode that I put out last week was on the John Edwards campaign finance violation case. That was last week. The one that I'm putting up this week is about a bank robbery case where the agent is coming on with the bank robber that he investigated. That's this week. And then the following week, I may do something. I think it's on the FBI working in Russia and in some of the former Soviet bloc countries. So, I mean, every week it is something different. So if you're only into missing and murder cases, and you'll come on and check to see if the new episode is about a missing person or a murder, and if it's not, then I understand that you might move on. But if you are into everything, like kind of, I call it like a 60 minutes menu, where you don't know what's going to be on, and it could be a different story or case or violation every week. That's what keeps it exciting for me, to be able to have that variety. Because again, I probably couldn't do a true crime show if it was only about murders and missing murders and child predators, because to me, that is for me, that is just too heavy for me. But to be able to mix it up and have a case about a cyber crime or an espionage spy case, and then mix it in with those very important, missing and murdered and child predator cases, keeps me sane.
Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps me mentally healthy to be able to mix it up a bit.
Oh, goodness. So it's so interesting how, like, at the beginning when you're retired, but you have a lot going on. So
I have way more than I want to have going on, to tell you the truth.
So where can people find you? Social media, your podcast, your books, where can they find everything?
Yes. So my website is jerriwilliams.com, and that's JERRI Williams.com. I am on a LinkedIn as Jerri Williams. I'm on X as Jerri Williams 1, on Instagram, Jerri Williams 1, Threads, and I'm missing something. Facebook.
So your books, people can find them on Amazon.
They can Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, wherever books are sold. And not only are they ebooks and paperback, but my books are also audiobooks. So you can get them on Audible or Spotify.
Nice. And where can people find your podcast?
On all your favorite podcast apps, whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify or any of them, it's available wherever you can, you usually get your audio and podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jerri, for coming on Danny After Dark. I really, really appreciate it. This has been awesome. And
it has
I
been.
Look forward, we spoke earlier before we came live, I look forward to seeing you again at CrimeCon Denver.
Yes, I will definitely be there. There is no conflict in my schedule or in other events that are happening. I was at another conference this year, but I will. My plan is to be in Denver in 2025 at CrimeCon on Podcast Row. So I guess I'll see you and everybody else there next year.
All right. Thank you again, Jerri, so much for being here. And until next time, everybody, remember, we don't live in darkness. Darkness lives in us. Bye, everyone.